I will say confession up front. I never sought out to create a category. And I don't think anyone seeks out to create a category. Honestly, if you went back to 2013 when we launched Gainsight, these are some real photos, we were just like any other startup. We dressed up for team photos, we went to trade shows, we rang gongs for the tiny deals we were doing, we celebrated birthdays. And being honest, in 2013, I wasn't concerned about creating a category. I was trying to create a Wi-Fi network in our office that actually worked. Literally, some of you have, and I'm still struggling with that, by the way. It's still a problem, amazingly. No amount of venture capital can solve that. But along the way, over 6 years of doing Gainsight, as Lloyd described, we ended up having something magical happen, which is we became part of creating a category that's called customer success. And it didn't happen overnight, but there was kind of one moment just about a year ago where we kind of stepped back and said, wow, maybe something's here. I got an article emailed to me, and it said, what it takes to be a category king. And honestly, we were trying to create a category, so I was very excited to read this article. I clicked on it, I scrolled into the article. It said they're gonna learn lessons from Slack and Salesforce and Marketo and HubSpot, and then somehow Gainsight was on that list. There's no reason Gainsight should be on the list of Slack, Salesforce, Marketo, HubSpot. It's kind of like making a list of the most athletically talented people in the world and putting Serena Williams, Tom Brady, Megan Rapinoe, and Nick Maida on the same slide. You just don't want to do that. Those people don't belong together. That's me in the Photoshop there. Now, I figured out later on that that category creator article with us featured in it was probably written by my mom, which was totally cool. She definitely thinks we're a category creator. But what we realized was we actually did do something special. And in fact, we've gotten asked over and over again, how did we try to create this category customer success? So this talk is all about that. One of the reasons I think people are fascinated by creating a category is that it allows you to really restructure the way people think about a market. If you Google category creation, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of articles and research papers. It's really amazing. And what you'll find in general in category creation is there's a lot of benefits, right? One of them is if you're creating your new category, you don't have as many competitors because you're starting something new. You don't have as much noise because you can define what that new playground looks like. And customers don't have a pre-existing notion of what you should do, so you can kind of invent that for them. So it's super exciting. There's one downside, one small downside to creating a category, which is usually initially you have no customers, which really sucks in the early days, so there's nobody to sell to. But category creation is really, really powerful if you do it right. And actually there's some great research. Harvard Business Review did this study, and they found the companies that created categories ended up capturing the vast majority of the revenue growth and market capitalization in the categories they're in. But I'm going to talk a lot about category creation, but I want to say up front that it's not really for everyone. Because we were on that high seeing that article that featured us about category creation, and then literally just a few days later, we read an article that said, don't try to create a category. And this guy talks about, you should read it, it's an interesting article, about how he tried to create a category and it didn't work. Because it doesn't always work. It's not always the right thing. And he uses the great analogy that category creation can be like trying to fight a land war in Asia. If you get the reference, it's Princess Bride if you do it. And category creation doesn't really make sense for everyone, because sometimes there's an existing category out there that you can just take over, right? Many of you might be building products that are the next generation of something that's already existed. One of the best examples of all time of that was Workday. I think everyone knows Workday, huge public software company, right? They didn't have to create a category. HR software, which is what they do, existed for a long time. And the founders of Workday had started the previous on-premise HR software company, a company called PeopleSoft, right? And then they created a cloud-based version, and that's obviously a gigantic company now, right? So sometimes category creation isn't the right playbook. For many of you, this might not apply. And frankly, for some of you, you may have done something before, like for example, in the Workday case, they'd started the previous company, they knew how to reinvent it, and so they didn't need to create a category. So I just want to say up front that what I'm going to share with you is not the right idea for many of you. For many of you, you should just keep doing what you're doing, compete in an existing market, and not do category creation. But there are some of you in the audience, I think, that will probably feel the same way I do, where there was something new to be done, something new to be defined in front of you, and you kind of felt like you have two paths in front of you, and I love the Matrix, so I'll use the analogy that you felt like Neo, and there was the red pill and the blue pill, and I think in this talk, I encourage you all to join with me, go down the rabbit hole, and we will talk about category creation and all the learnings that come in there. So I'm going to talk about 5 things in this presentation, and these are based on lots of conversations I've had with founders about what are the things you should do in category creation, and what are the mistakes people make along the way. What are the hard things that make that really challenging? So we're going to dive right in. So first one I want to talk about is the idea that category creation requires a lot of intestinal fortitude. Because if you're going to go do something new, one of the hardest things is early on, a lot of people will think it's a dumb idea. They're going to think that this isn't the right thing to go create something new because it won't be familiar for them, right? It won't be as familiar to do this brand new thing versus doing something that already existed. And so you've got to ignore a lot of the advice that you get. So at Gainsight 2013, we're trying to launch something new. We thought it was customer success. And we went out to research analysts. We went out to Gartner and Forrester and other folks. And we said, hey, we're doing customer success. And they said, great. So is that customer support? Or is it account management? Or is it customer relationship management? Tell me which of those three you fit into, because that's what we know. That's the world we know, right? Is that existing world. And so category creation, sometimes you have to have that fortitude to say, no, we're going to be something different. And the same thing happened when I asked all my friends who are CEOs and entrepreneurs. They said, this is really cool, category creation, great idea, like that. But have you ever thought about using a name that people would understand a little bit better? So all my friends in 2013 said things like, hey, what about customer analytics? What about customer machine learning? What about customer business intelligence? This customer success thing, I don't get. What about customer insights or maybe customer artificial intelligence? These were all real suggestions that we got because people said, I want something more familiar, right? And if it was 2019, they probably would have suggested customer autonomous scooters, right? So they would have said, what's the buzzword of the day? And let's apply it to that. But the reality is we thought there was an opportunity to do something different. And what inspired us, and I think it might be relevant for many of you, was there was a new job out there. Many people here now know customer success manager is a very popular job. But in 2013, there was literally just a few hundred customer success managers in the world. Salesforce had some. There are other ones out there. And we said, maybe there's an opportunity to create a category around a new job. And so we were kind of stuck in this crossroads, and probably some of you are in the same, which is, do we go with the familiar category that everyone understands, or we do something different? And what really inspired me was Aaron Levy is the founder and CEO of Box. Many of you have probably seen him speak before. He has this great quote, which is basically, find people in a business that are kind of ignored, that don't have that sort of like conference to go to, don't have that brand affiliation, and make them heroes. And so we said, wow, there's an opportunity for us to make this new job a hero, and that's the customer success category 6 years later. The biggest lesson I tell you from this first part of ignoring advice is it's not the analysts that are going to define the category, it's not your friends, it's the customer that's going to define the category. So sometimes you need to be bold enough to say, I'm going to listen to what's happening in the market and ignore a lot of the advice I get. And now for us, customer success, as Lloyd said, ended up becoming a big category. And actually one cool stat, LinkedIn has a survey they do every year of the most promising jobs in the world. It's now the third most promising job. So really, really cool. We're not the only ones that had to go down this path of coming up with a new category name. Many, many people have done this. Like some of you in the audience might work in the robotic process automation space, RPA. That's a new category, kind of redefining things, right? Some of you might work in the world of DevSecOps, which is like DevOps and security together, which by the way, lesson is you can just mash two categories together and you make a new category, right? Or some of you may know, not all of you, CRM, which we all know, today is a huge existing category. A long time ago, it was a new category. It was a brand new concept. Tom Siebel, who started Siebel Systems, other folks had to create that category. So this first lesson is you having the intestinal fortitude to say, I'm going to create a new category and ignore a lot of that advice. And it's very hard because early on, you're going to get a lot of people telling you it's a dumb idea, right? That's going to come up more and more. So that's the first thing I want to focus on. Second thing, we all love software in this room. Many of us are software entrepreneurs. We love our products. The second piece of advice that we've picked up along the way is the idea that creating a category isn't just about your product, it's about the people at your customers. And this really showed up for us, tied to Lloyd's story, back in 2013 when we were launching Gainsight. We were in a temporary office in San Jose, California, in a Regus, which is basically like a WeWork, but with worse coffee, like a small little temporary office. And we're thinking, hey, we should host an event to bring together this customer success community. Now, we thought about doing a customer event, like a lot of people do customer events. The problem was we didn't have any customers, so it would just be a super depressing event, right? Nobody would show up except our friends and family. And so we said, let's host an event that was for this community of customer success people. One of the most pivotal decisions in the history of the company was we said, let's not call it a Gainsight event. We're not going to call it Gainsight because we want this to not be about us. And so we called it Pulse. Lloyd talked about it. And the first time we did Pulse in 2013, we said this isn't about Gainsight, this is about this community. And Lloyd talked about it a little bit, but this thing ended up exploding where we had 300 people show up the first year, and we just did our 7th one in San Francisco at Moscone Center and had about 5,200 people in the audience, right? And it's not because of Gainsight and who we are, it's because we created an event that was for this community. And that's a big, big lesson. Can you create something that's bigger than who you are? And for us, we ended up turning that into lots of different concepts of creating community. Everything from multiple Pulse events in London and Sydney, to a road show in different cities, to local meetups so people can get together and talk about customer success, to an online university. So there's so many things you can do if you decide to go big on creating this community that's not about your product, but it's about the people at your customers. And if you go to one of our events, just like this event here, it's not about Gainsight. The topics are things like how much should you pay your CSMs, or where they should report into, or how you get them to work better with your product team. Things that people actually care about, not just our software. Again, we're not the only ones to do this. We stood on the shoulders of giants. We learned from people like HubSpot, probably some HubSpot here, people in the room, who do an amazing job with their conference Inbound, or Culture Amp, a younger company, just created a great event. You know, Coupa does an awesome event. So a lot of companies are doing this now, and they're doing events that are bigger than what their company's just about. In the second topic, there's a few learnings to take away. Number one, if some of you know the open source world, they've been doing this forever, right? They create a community that's bigger than their company to support whatever product that they've got, right? Number two, a lot of value in naming it something different. So thinking about doing an event or like a community, think about naming it different than your company. A little tip. Momentum is important. If you create a community, people feel proud to be part of a growing community. So I showed you that chart of Pulse growing, and at the Pulse conference every year, we have people stand up if you're at the first Pulse in 2013, and then the second Pulse, and it kind of goes like a wave like that. People love that. They want to be part of something big. And at the end of the day, just like this event, it's not about the boring keynote speaker on the stage. It's about people being connected in the hallways. It's about making those connections. And if you do an event, that's the big takeaway. And finally, if you think about the second area of creating an event that's bigger than your product, remember, it's like a product. So I know Lloyd cares a lot about this event. We care a lot about our events that we do. We survey the customers. I read all the responses. We think about every single detail, seating, coffee, everything. Now, one of the biggest challenges as you think about category creation and running an event is the idea that it's actually much harder to measure. Because for many of you, you're all about measurement. I have an SDR, makes a phone call, creates a lead. How much did I spend? How much did I generate? But the reality is that if you think about things like this, it's a much longer play. And there's a great quote from Einstein: not all things worth counting are countable, and not all things that count are worth counting. So a lot of like what we've seen in our own conference is it's the most important thing we have ever done, but also the least measurable. And that's actually really, really hard to kind of internalize. Frankly, it's hard for your CFO or your VC to digest too, right? So this is the second kind of hard thing. Is the reality is if you're going to go down this path, it's going to be harder to justify the ROI, but you got to just believe. The third one is the idea that if you believe, you've got to put yourself out there. It's not just about running an event and sitting behind the scenes or writing some blog posts. It's about getting out there and really practicing and preaching what you believe in with your new category. So for us, it meant customer success all around the world. And that means, unfortunately, tons and tons of United Airlines flights, which really sucks. But you end up in these amazing places with customers to just get the word out there. It wasn't just about big conferences. It was actually, Lemkin has a great tweet recently about, you want happy enterprise customers? Get on jets. You got to get out there if you're going to go create a category. For us, what that meant is our executive team, including me and some others, have spoken at hundreds and hundreds of our customers' all-hands meetings. Not to talk about Gainsight, not to talk about our product, but to talk about the area of customer success. And it's created so much community within our customer base. And then we made that more scalable. We wrote a book on customer success, and that gets the word out there. Really, really big opportunity if you think about doing a book. And again, we were inspired by lots of other companies, Zuora, Coupa, others that have written books and kind of canonized the knowledge that they've got. So this third area, the big takeaways are, when you think about the content, number one is, it's all about authentically getting into the mindset of that person, right? So you're focused on the people, you're evangelizing. It's not about your product. It's not about writing a blog post that's like 10 things to look for when you're looking at customer success software. That's just about your product. It's about 10 things to think about when your CSM tells you they're leaving, right? If you're a manager, that actually matters. So that's, you have to get in their mindset, build content that's all about that mindset, not just about your product. And then it's about getting the word out there. Like one tactical thing is when you are creating a category, you don't care about gating content and how many MQLs you generate. You're putting stuff on LinkedIn, you're putting blog posts ungated, you're just getting the word out. Podcasts end up working really, really well in this world if you're thinking about that. Another really good little hack. And then finally, like I mentioned, the book can be a home run, although it's a lot of work. It's something that's surprisingly been very effective for us. This third area is hard though, evangelism and all this stuff, because one of the things you have to figure out is who's gonna do that? Is that you as the founder? Do you wanna do that? Do you wanna go out there to all these customers and talk and write a book? Are you gonna hire somebody to do that? One thing a lot of companies will do is they'll hire somebody from one of their customers to be that evangelist. So that's something to think about as you go forward. Now, the fourth idea, tying to evangelism, is whatever you do, if you're creating this category, you're trying to create a bond with your customers, right? You're trying to connect this connection with your community. And it's all about authenticity. It's all about really putting yourself out there. And again, we've learned from some great companies. I think Box does a great job of like their culture showing up externally. PagerDuty that just went public, another great example. At Gainsight, we're a super values and purpose-driven company. And so for us, we wanted to put our values out there to our community when we create this category. Our purpose is we want to be a human-first business, and we got some great values like childlike joy, and we bring those to our community. So when you think about creating a category, think about what your values are and if you can bring those to your community. Just some fun examples of what we did to make that happen. In 2015, amazingly, I was driving down the road listening to Blank Space by Taylor Swift, as one does, and I was thinking, we could rewrite this as a customer success song, and we did. And we had our customers perform Blank Space in a video, right? And that's so crazy, but it creates that sense of connection with your customers that is amazing, right? At our conference, we did lots of different things like that to just create that sort of zany connection, right? We had Vanilla Ice come perform at our conference and do Ice Ice Baby, which wasn't anything to do with category creation. That was just super cool. That was just great. Life goal achieved, and surprisingly affordable too, by the way. We did a customer success carpool karaoke series that different CEOs come on and we sang and talk about customer success. And then finally, at either a high moment or a low moment in my career, we even decided that the world needed a rap video about customer success, which is actually available on Spotify and has sold at least 10 copies so far, I think, maybe. But seriously, I put these examples up because companies that want to build a category need to build an emotional bond. It's not just the intellectual, it's the heart. What can you do to bring that heart to what you're doing? So many learnings here. It's about blurring the lines between who your company is, what your culture is, and what your customers are doing. It's about really using those conferences to break the walls and let the customer know who you are as a person, as a human being. It's got to be authentic to you, who you are. You can't just do this if you don't feel that way. And then finally, if you're like me and you want to make a rap video, you got to have no shame as well. So that's very important. But this fourth area of being authentic is really, really hard. Maybe the hardest thing in this whole presentation, because it requires you to be comfortable being vulnerable and telling these customer base and these people you've never met who you really are. And I've written a lot about vulnerability, and frankly at our conference, just as an example, in May, I talked on stage about not just this fun stuff and rap videos, but how I was really lonely as a kid and didn't have any friends, and like how I still feel lonely sometimes. And I put that out there because I want to build that connection with our customers, right? So that's the fourth area, really being authentic. And then the fifth one, which is kind of a wrap up, is the idea that if you want to build a category, it's not going to happen overnight. Being honest, it's super frustrating. It's like mind-numbing sometimes, because you're trying to drive a car down a road where there's no pavement, and you're like paving the road as you drive. It's really, really hard. And Sequoia Capital has a great expression. They say they want entrepreneurs that are long-term greedy, not short-term. And I think if you want to build a category, you got to be long-term greedy. Because in the early days of Gainsight, customer success was a tiny thing. And this is a chart of LinkedIn, CSM's growing year by year. Now it's a big profession. There's probably 60,000 as of today in the world. But back when we started, there was nobody, right? And so at the end of the day, category creation requires you to have that patience. And also requires you to accept that you're going to reinvent yourself. We just reinvented ourselves to say we're more than customer success now. We call it Customer Cloud, and we have to talk to product people and sales people. So it's much, much more. So one of the hardest things in this whole process is the fact that having that long-term orientation is really, really hard, because every day you're going to be sitting there saying, should I hire a salesperson? What's our quarter going to look like next quarter? What do I need to do next month? And if you're long-term oriented, you don't have answers. It's really, really hard to figure out what to do. So you got to have that patience. But if nothing else, I hope I showed you in this presentation what that kind of red pill looks like. And I hope I kind of gave you a sense that going down that path can be really exciting. It can be financially very rewarding for your customers, for your employees, for your investors. It can be really cool to be dominating a new area. And frankly, one of the biggest psychic benefits is if you create a category and if you're part of doing that, you get to say years later, you helped make that happen. And honestly, that's like one of the most powerful things you can do in business. And if nothing else, if you have nothing else from this, you don't go down this path, I do hope one day you have the greatest day in your life like I had in my business world a few months ago, When I Googled Gainsight and I said, we really made it in category creation, because not only are we showing up as a category creator and customer success, but when you Google Gainsight, we actually currently show up as a hip hop artist based on our rap video that we made. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.